Hey everybody, Phil here. My goodness, it's been a long time since I recorded a video. I've been working and doing all kinds of stuff, including moving. As you can maybe see, I'm in a different place than usual, and I'll be here for a long time now. And maybe I'll show you more stuff as time goes on. But I'm back, and Happy New Year. It's 2022. I know you might be watching this in year 2065 or something like that from your underground bunker. But today we're going to talk about, well, it came about from me actually working, from me taking on other clients. You know, I've always worked kind of by myself and on my own things, and normally I'm working on one project at a time, and that for the past 5 or 6 years was Zonmaster, but the tech on that is so stable, I just decided there's got to be other things I can do. So went out, got this other contract, and what I found is that people use other things that I'm used to. So, as you know, with Zonmaster, I was using MySQL and Elasticsearch 7 and Memcache and Redis and things like that. Well, these guys, they're using Postgres, and now they're up to Postgres 13, but the latest Postgres is actually 14, but they're not using that, and they're using Elasticsearch 6. So I had to figure out how to do that on my Mac while still having my Zonmaster development environment and other developments that I'm working on. And in theory, you can do that with Homebrew, and I struggled, and I said, to hell with it, there's got to be a better way than this, and of course there is. There's something that's actually made for this, and that is Docker. And so I've always been resistant to Docker. If you don't know what Docker is, well, you're not in the right place, because to be honest, I probably don't really know what Docker is either. But it's essentially a virtualized machine. And instead of just firing up a generic Ubuntu server or whatever, Docker, there's hundreds and thousands or whatever of images available. So you can fire up a Docker container instance that is specific to what it is you want to do. So what we're going to do right now is create a new Rails app, and we're going to have that point to Postgres 13 inside of a Docker container and show you how to do that. It's not so difficult, but it took me a while to figure it out. And again, I'm on a Mac, so it might be different if you're doing something else, but what we're going to do right now is create a Rails app, and we're going to call this Docker test. And we'll use the database, PostgreSQL, and that should be all we need to do. And this will take a minute to install, of course. In 2022, in the next few weeks probably, there'll be some new videos coming out from me, and I'm going to look at Rails 7 for your education and mine, and I'm going to write a full app in Rails 7 right before your eyes, probably over the course of several weeks or videos, and that way we can both get to learn more about Rails 7. So that'll be coming up. And I'll be doing other things, maybe Docker related, or if you have any questions or things that you're interested in about Ruby on Rails or the environments or anything like that, not the environment like outside, but environments, sure, just put a comment in any video, and I'll take a look and we'll see what we can do. Okay, so let's fire that up. And now, even if you're using your database in a Docker container, you still have to have your database installed just for linking. And so I have Postgres installed. So if we look at, I think just, I think if we, there we go. So if we look just at the one I've got installed, so I've got 14.1 running on this machine. We can see it says psql 14.1, and I don't think I have anything that interesting installed. Let's move on. So let's install the data and let's get it. Well, let's do a scaffold first. Sorry, I'm all over the place here. Rails G scaffold user. No, let's call it client with a name and an address. That's all we're going to do. Create a symbol, and let's go into the Docker test and do that again. So let's do a Rails DB create. Now all of this, of course, is happening inside, and I'll do DB migrate. Inside of the one that I've got on my machine. You're saying, Phil, what's the point of all this? You're supposed to be talking about Docker. Well, I'm just going to show you that there's two different things here. And so if we look at the code, and let's take a look at the database. No, yeah, the database, yeah. And we can see this is the standard one. It's just saying adapter Postgres. It's not saying anything about the host, password. Host is localhost. Port is this port 5432, which is the default Postgres port. So when we run our Rails app, it's going to connect to that. Of course, that's the whole point of this file. But we want to use Docker. So let's go back, and I've got some files that I created earlier that we're just going to drop into Docker test. And the way I'm going to do this Docker thing is using Docker Compose. Now there's two ways you can run Docker, at least. One is to just say Docker run, give it an image name, give it a bunch of other parameters, and off it goes. Or Docker Compose is a little more sophisticated, and it's easier to kind of bundle up services together and to do more complicated images, and that's what we'll be doing in a second here. But for right now, we're going to use Docker Compose, and this is my basic Docker Compose file to get my database going. And I'm going to change the name of this because I did this earlier and I made a mistake. Docker test app. So we set the version, and then we list the services that we want Docker to run for us. So in this case, we're only going to do a database, and we're going to pull down this image, Postgres 13.5. Now, if you don't have that on your machine, it's going to go to the interwebs, and it's going to pull it down, it's going to fire it up, and use that as your base image. In other words, the machine that you're running is based on that. We're going to call it something, and let's call it DT Postgres. And I'm going to set a password, philsmy123. This is not a password I use normally. And here's the ports. Now what, as we saw in the database YAML, Postgres' standard port is 5432. Now we're going to fire up a Docker container, and inside that Docker container is an instance of Postgres that's going to be listening at 5432. But for the sake of ease on our local machine, we're going to give it a different port. And we're going to call that 54320, just so we put it up there in the higher numbers. And then we're going to use something called a volume. And this will automatically create a volume if it doesn't exist, called DT app data. And it's going to link it, symlink it, for want of a better word, inside of the Docker container to this location of var lib PostgreSQL data. And what that does is Docker volumes are on your local machine. They're not inside the container, because one of the great things and one of the bad things about Docker is that it fires up from this image, and that image is kind of immutable. You can't really change it. I mean, you can change it, but when you fire it up again, it's going to go back to that unsaved image state, unless you create your own custom image. But for a database, of course, that's completely ridiculous, because you want to save the data. So the easiest way to save the data is simply to put it on your local machine and have it loaded up into the Docker container at launch time. And that's what this does. This is kind of the trick here. And it means that your data is separate and all of that, and it's just nice all around. So here we go. This is our basic Docker Compose file. And what I can do is, am I in the right directory? Yes, I am. Because we call this Docker Compose YAML, it will automatically look for that. So if we say Docker Compose, we don't need to say the file name. It's going to use Docker Compose YAML by default. We say up, and we can say -d, and that'll put it in the background. We don't have to do that. And I'm also wondering if I've done the eval here. So, but let's do a Docker Compose up. That's the easiest thing. It's going to fire it up. There we go. It's going off. And we can see this is in the foreground. It's not been demonized. Why anything should be demonized. And it's files belong to this database system will be owned by user Postgres, blah blah blah, and it's gone off and it's fired up a Postgres. And there's two things we can do here. We can look at Docker PS and we can see that there's the image and here's the name. Is that the name we gave it? Nope. Did I not save that file? Nope. Oh boy. Anyway, I'm going to just quickly close that. And delete it. And I'm actually going to Docker remove it. And let's do that again. I'm hopeless. I'm really hopeless at these videos. Let's do Docker Compose up. Again. Now it's creating DT Postgres. And it's going off. And it had already just run, so it doesn't really need to do some stuff again. So now we've got DT Postgres. And we can actually connect to that instance. If we say Docker exec, and we want to connect to DT Postgres with that, we don't need any database because we don't have any database. And there we can see that it's connecting to a pSQL of 13.5. So that's different than if I just do a pSQL. What did I call it? Docker test development, I think. There you can see that's the local one of 14.1 and that's the remote one of 13.5. So that's good, but we're still not really connecting to it. We just got this thing working out there. Let's connect it to our Rails app. And the way we need to do that is if we look for the machine IP. Now on a Mac, and I think this is slightly different on the computers. On a Mac, it gives you a virtual IP address. So this is what your host is running on. So now we can go over to our database YAML and we can set the host to be this. And we know that our port was that funny port, remember? That. And we also set a password of philsmile123. Now, when we run our Rails app, and I want to, what did I call that model? It was client, right? Client. So if I say client.all, it's going to password authentication for user philsmile, so that's interesting. So the user is actually Postgres. Let's do that again. And client all, no database. So we never ran the Rails DB create and the Rails DB migrate. And so that's done. I don't think you can quite see the bottom of my screen. So let's Rails again, client.all, and we don't have anything. And let's say client.create name fill. And there we go. So now we've got that. And if we exit out of Rails and again go back and look at the Postgres user of Postgres, and we want the database of Docker test development, select star from clients, and we've got one, but just for the sake of argument, select star from clients. This is the one that I did first on my original machine. There isn't any. So there it is. Our Rails app is connected to Postgres in a Dockerfile. Easy. It wasn't actually that difficult. Most of this video time has been me talking. But nothing is ever easy in the real life. So this customer that I'm working for, they use a Postgres extension, PG Repack, which I'm not quite sure what that does, but it's important. So how do you do that? Well, we could go on to our Docker instance by running bash. Now we're in an actual prompt inside of our instance, and we could do a bunch of stuff. We could install all the things that we needed to install to use PG Repack, and that would be like tons. We'd have to install Python. We'd have to install Python. We'd have to install pip, and we'd have to install the Postgres server libraries and a bunch of other things. And we could do all that, and we could install PG Repack. But when we tore down and tomorrow fired up again, those extensions and everything won't be there. Now, the data for the database will be there because we saved that outside, but the actual image, the actual machine, is not going to have PG Repack installed. So what do we do? Well, I'll tell you what we do. We don't use what we just made. So let's kill or stop. Oops. I'm not quite sure what the difference between kill and stop is, but and then RM it, so totally forget about it. And what we can do is, instead of just using the Docker Compose like this, we can use two files. We can use our Docker Compose, but then also, and I'm just going to do that so that it'll open up in another window here. We can use it with a Dockerfile. And a Dockerfile is the stuff that will happen when you fire up your instance. So inside of our Dockerfile now, so okay, let's talk about the differences with the Compose. It's pretty much the same version, services, DB, but instead of having that image name, if we look over here, where it's an image Postgres 13.5, instead of that, we've got a build. And that will go off and use this Dockerfile. And everything else is going to be the same. What did I call it over there? No, I won't call it. I'll call it DT2 Postgres. And we will use the same data of DT app just because we've already got the data there. Why do it again? So we don't need that. What we need is this, which it decided to close. So what we say is, now this is a Dockerfile, and Dockerfile has its own specific syntax that you can check out using the Googles. So we're going to use that same base image that we were using before, Postgres 13.5. But what we're going to do is when we fire it up, we're going to say run apt-get update and fix that. And then we're going to install software properties common, pip, which is Python, Postgres server dev lib, libread line, and then we're going to install pgn client, and then with pgnx we're going to install PG Repack. And doing all of that will then give us a image that has Postgres 13.5 with PG Repack installed. And then from then on, we can use that. And it's kind of like our own custom image. So how do we do that? We don't have anything running, Docker PS, and I'm just going to close this window. We don't need this window anymore. Okay, so Docker PS is showing empty, and just if we make sure that's fine. What we can do then is instead of saying Docker compose up, we can say Docker compose, and then we set a file name. What was it with file? Right? Up. And that will go off, and it's building this context. And so what it's going to do is going to go down and it's because I've done this before, it's going to use a cache. I'm not quite sure how to clear that, sorry. But it will go off and run all of those things, and you can see that it's run PG Repack. So if we go on to the machine again, what is it? Docker exec itdt2 Postgres bash. It will have, for instance, we can just check and see whether it has PGNX client installed, and it does. It's already installed. So this version, this image, already has all the stuff that we need. And now, tomorrow when we fire it up, we say Docker compose up with file, and it will have all the extensions that we need. And I'm going to close this, and I'll show you that if we simply add -d at the end, it's going to run that as a daemon in the background. Docker PS thing is running there. And you can say down, and that will take those down. And if we look at PS, they're gone. So that's great. So we've got our environment, our Rails, talking to the proper Dockerized, extensionized Postgres file. Now I said they also used Elasticsearch 6. So Docker Compose, you don't have to just have one thing. Docker Compose, you can do many things in one file. So here, here's the one that I pulled from before. I can just pull it over just to show you. So this is the database. Just make it exactly the same because I did make some changes. And so there's the database one, and then up here I've got Elasticsearch 6. Now I made a custom image for that, and we're not going to go into that right now. And I'm opening up 2 ports. And in this case, I just decided to use the standard Elasticsearch ports locally, though I could use different ports. And then, so this is W2. So let's clear this out. If I say Docker compose up W2, this will actually run, there's the Postgres and there's the Elasticsearch, and if we look at Docker PS, there's the Elasticsearch 6 and the Docker test DB, which is using our own Dockerfile. That's all I'm going to go into for now. It's a bit of a long video. I hope I explained it clearly. I hope you understand what I'm talking about and why I'm doing this. So to recap, we are now able to use Rails pointing to virtualized databases or virtualized other services. That's the beauty of it. It's not just databases. It's Elasticsearch. You can have virtualized Memcache. You can do all of these things virtualized so that you have a kind of exact, specific environment and multiples of them. And you can have it in a Docker Compose file inside of your Rails app so that it is specific to the application that you're working on, and that can just be your workflow. When you're starting to work with that particular application, you fire up Docker Compose up, and if you use custom ports locally, like I use 54320, as you can see here on this screen. If you can have multiples of these running anyway if your machine's powerful enough. So I hope you can see some potential there. I think it's pretty exciting and interesting, and definitely something that I'm going to be using in the future from now on. And it'll let me explore a lot more databases without having to go through the pain of homebrew. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Oh my goodness. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, whatever it is, bell notification, whatever the other things are. Do that, and stick around and come back soon. And if you have any comments, drop them in the comments box. See you later.